Oh, wait. Record. Wait, did it record? Oh, hello. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
I'm
All of a
good.
sudden, we're live. Oh, how'd that happen?
Actually, I have it. Oh, so it is recording. Are we recording? Yes. Okay, just want to make sure. So I'm so excited to have you here because your and Nancy's book of Pet Loss Companion is one of my favorites. Actually, this is my little marker that I've had for a long time.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you find it helpful and that hopefully your clients find it helpful when they're in this situation where they've lost an animal companion.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Can I ask you how did the book come to be in the first place?
The book was drawn from the decades of experience that we have facilitating pet loss. So Nancy's actually been doing this for 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it for about 12, a little bit more than that. And I just decided we got to take everything that we've learned and put it into a small, really digestible
Mm-hmm.
package because it would be great to reach more people. And
Yeah.
so that's really what the book is all about, what we've learned and trying to make it easy to digest because when people are grieving, it's just so hard to concentrate and focus
Right.
and so the book is in a very simple format and so now I mean that was the thinking behind it and now with the podcast that we do we're able to dialogue with people about their losses and that's
Mhm.
been very very rich as well.
Ah, wow. Well, I do appreciate that it is small and concise, but it's I have to tell you, it was chapter. I love the whole book. It's chapter
Oh, great.
5 that really got me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite chapter in the whole book of losing your pet can hurt more than losing your parent. Um, and and we've had a lot of responses from people of of wow, wait a minute, I really want to hear this because I know the call that I've gotten over and over and over again for years has been, I know this sounds strange or silly, but the death of my pet has been more, traumatic than the death of my dad or mom, or there must be something wrong with me.
Yeah. I mean we hear that all the time
Yeah.
in group
Yeah.
meetings. People would come in and sometimes they'd say it in a very tentative way. Like, I feel like I must be crazy
Hmm.
because losing this cat or dog or horse or parrot
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
rat or even fish actually
Hmm.
has been harder than
Yeah.
losing my parent or a sibling. The only thing we never heard this is harder than losing a child.
Right.
And so, that of course makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's very common, it's very typical.
Mhm.
And the reasons that the way I understand this is that we live with such closeness
Mhm.
to our animal family members.
Mhm.
We are in very, very intimate contact with them. And I often describe it as the kind of intimacy we have with an infant or with a baby before they have speech
Mhm.
because we have to we have to be ready to help them with their every need. We
Mhm.
have to anticipate their needs. We have to care for them in ways that are often requiring us to touch their bodies and
Mhm.
also as they age, they often have infirmities and illnesses that require us to give them medication or sometimes to
Mhm.
give them injections and just support them as they move even and so there's this kind of closeness that is extraordinarily special
Yeah.
and and when we lose that we lose a chunk of ourselves in a sense because
Mhm.
there's just that so much of our everyday lives
Mhm.
they are part of
Mhm.
and it's also in most cases it's a very simple kind of love.
Yeah.
The animals don't argue with us. They don't betray us. They don't tell lies.
Right. So unconditional.
It's absolutely, it's just the purest kind of
Mhm.
connection.
Yeah.
And there's other reasons too. And there are things like when we have an animal companion, they ride with us through a chunk of our lives. They mark
Absolutely.
an era
Yep.
in our lives.
Hmm.
And when we lose them, we often feel the end of that era. So people will
Hmm.
say to us, some people will say, this dog or cat I have had since I was 18 years old or since I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it marks their transition to adulthood.
Hmm.
Other people will say, I have
Hmm.
moved through many different locations and jobs,
Hmm.
and I went through a divorce and a remarriage, or I got married and I had my first children, and this friend was there through all of it.
Yeah.
And so to lose that connection, to lose that
Mhm.
relationship is so hard. It's
And
so hard.
I think that's such a great point because, I will also hear people go, they got me through this
Yep.
really awful time. Is that,
Yep.
that was they were my steady presence.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you, I mean, you know this, and as I've said before we get started, I so appreciate what you do. It's so important.
Oh,
As I've communicated with you before, grief is the elemental human emotion.
yes.
We are consistently
Hmm.
losing and gaining, but losing
Hmm.
and gaining every change in our life, every transition in our life. And I believe every therapist should be well equipped to
Me
help with
too.
small and large
Hmm.
losses.
Hmm.
And but the reality is that we live in a society that immensely devalues any kind of negative feeling and certainly loss. I
Yes.
mean, the whole positivity thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with Barbara Ehrenreich's book, Bright Sided. It's a really
No.
great, it's called Bright Sided, and it's a really great critique
Hmm.
of both the cultural focus on happy, happy, happy all the time and
Hmm.
positive and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and also the emergence of positive psychology.
Uh-huh.
and,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that
No.
as long as we're able also, the way I see it, to appreciate it and live with the whole palette of feelings,
Yep.
some of which, and certainly grief is in this realm, some of which are very challenging and very difficult.
Yep.
And so one of the things I think that happens when anybody is grieving any loss, whether it's a pet or a different sort of relationship, is that those around them often are flummoxed, like
Hmm.
just not ready to help. They're not ready to listen. It raises their own discomfort in
Hmm.
ways that they are not practiced with experiencing.
Yeah.
And so and we, of course, we absorb that and we do that to ourselves. Why am I feeling so badly about this?
Hmm.
And we incorporate those messages, which we probably heard now and then, about it's just a dog or it's just a cat or it's just
Right.
a guinea pig or it's just a rat or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's not just an anything. It's an important relationship in our lives.
Mhm. And you're right, it's so minimized, and there's also the, "Here, we'll just go get another one."
Yeah.
You
One of the most one of the most offensive things you can say to, I mean, would you say, why don't you just go get another best friend, or why don't you just go get another sister?
Right,
Doesn't
right.
work that way.
No, no.
And so there's just everything that the world teaches other people, it also teaches us, and we do it to
Mhm,
ourselves. So one of the key messages, I think, is always we need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to validate our own feelings. We
mhm,
need to appreciate that the way that we experience this loss is absolutely okay,
mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with us,
That's right.
and that if others can't be empathic and support us, then we need to find those who will.
Mhm.
And we need to do whatever we need to do in order to take the best care of ourselves. at the same time, in a family, it's very important for people to recognize that some may be grieving very differently than
Mhm.
others.
Absolutely. And I
And
think that that gets misinterpreted and judged of, well, you don't seem to have really cared, or you're not crying, so it must mean
yeah,
that you don't really care, which
yeah,
I think then people who don't emote by crying much, it doesn't mean that they're not, you know, hurting.
yeah. It's like
Right.
we have to be non-judgmental toward
Mhm.
ourselves,
Right.
and we have to do the same for those around us. And one
Yeah.
of the things that we see, and it's a very broad stroke, but there are patterns that you see in terms of gender. And
Mhm.
so people who identify as male tend to have been taught. Let me put this differently. People who identify as female tend to have been taught and to have incorporated a much richer understanding of their emotional lives.
Mhm.
And again, it's a very broad stroke. It doesn't apply to
Right.
everybody, but it does apply to many. And
Mhm.
so there are many times where a woman will be feeling her whole range of feelings and expressing them. And the man in the relationship, if it's a heterosexual relationship, may be feeling like I was upset for a little bit and now I'm pretty okay.
Right.
And that's one of just as you were saying, that's just the way it is for that particular person. And maybe they're working it
Mhm.
out in other ways. Maybe
Mhm.
they are exercising more, or maybe they are doing some writing, or maybe that's just they just don't go there very much.
Mhm.
And it's just really important for people to be allowed to manage this however they are likely to do so. On the other hand, it is not a good thing for the person who processes it very quickly and moves on to
Mhm.
look at their intimate partner and say, "Hey, get with the program. Like, it's
Right.
been 3 months. How
Mhm.
come you're still struggling with" like, that is not okay. We
Mhm.
need to be respectful of each other, no matter which way we feel and however we're grieving.
Absolutely, and I think that's a hard thing to do when the other person we see is struggling, and we wanna make it better.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah,
and of course, that's one of
yeah.
the key fallacies in all of this is you can't
Mhm.
make it better for another
No,
person.
no.
You can be a compassionate
Mhm,
friend, partner,
mhm.
witness. You
Yeah.
can you can you can be with them and
Mhm,
you can be empathic, but if you try to fix it, you're almost always going to be experienced as dismissive
yeah,
in one way or another.
yeah.
And so you just have to be very careful. And that again goes back to what I mentioned before, that to be a compassionate listener
Mhm.
can be very upsetting for people who aren't used to sitting
Yep.
with their own discomfort, let alone another person's. Because if we love and respect somebody and we're sitting them and they're crying their eyes out, we're probably going to be pretty moved by that
Mhm,
ourselves.
mhm,
And if we are greatly uncomfortable with that, we might start giving suggestions on how
mhm.
they can feel better. And that's not going to be the most helpful thing to do. The most helpful thing to do is generally to just acknowledge that you're going through a very, very hard time.
Mhm.
I, I'm gonna be here with you through it.
Yeah.
That's all there is. That's all you can do.
Mhm, mhm. I think also sharing stories
Mhm.
about that pet, can be helpful, or to say, here, tell me another story about, I actually are, we've had many pets that we've opened our hearts up to, my husband and I, and they always come to the office.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, when when I know that they're having a really hard time and that they are dying, is it affects our clients, after they've died.
Mhm. Mhm.
People come in and go, "Oh, where's Sadie?"
Mhm.
And to be able to, I think that then uh, we get to be able to, we get to um, be able to help people learn how to deal with that um, here in the office. But I think also one of the earliest losses for many kids tends to be a pet, and I think if we can learn how to talk about that, how to prepare, how to support, then we really do. We do well by kids of being able to prepare them for other losses that they're going to have in the future.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so helpful for children to have
Mhm,
animal companions in their life because it teaches them so much. In the beginning, it teaches
mhm,
them about gentleness and responsibility
mhm.
and being attuned to another living being
Yeah.
and helping them to learn how to be in the world. And
Mhm.
then then they have a relationship with that other being, and then they see the life cycle as
Yeah.
it ends,
Yeah.
and it's really it's a beautiful part of
Yeah.
a child's life, I think. And as you said, I mean, one of the things I think it's very important for parents to understand is we are raising our children to be competent adults.
Mhm.
And adulthood is fraught with challenges, with
Mhm.
changes, with losses of all
Process.
kinds.
Yep.
And so we don't want to hide, we don't want to do that thing where Sandy went off to live on a farm
Mhm. Yes.
and she'll be very happy there. The things that I
Mhm.
used to hear about when in earlier years, and that would sometimes be we'd get a story like that when I was a kid about somebody's dog.
Sure.
and
Right.
so no, you want and you want to model, just as I'm sure you do, when your beloved Sadie died.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
sure you told your clients about that
Yes.
in a very pensive, sad sort of way. And
Mhm.
we're models for our kids. So
Yeah.
one of the things that it's important to know is it's okay to shed a tear and to be
Mhm.
upset and to cry. And
Yes.
because if you don't do that,
Mhm.
your child may feel like there's something odd about them, that they're feeling sad. We're role models for our kids
Mhm.
always,
Mhm.
always throughout their life, throughout our lives. And I believe that this goes on throughout the life cycle. We're always demonstrating for our kids
Mhm.
how hopefully a positive example of how to meet all the
Mhm.
challenges and opportunities in life. They're probably going to do it differently, but if they see that we have a life that is adventurous, that is adaptive,
Mhm.
that is constructive, it
Yeah.
gives them more, I think, more of a model for how
Mhm.
to do this for themselves. So I think it's really a very useful thing
Mhm.
for there to be pets in a child's life, and for them to, and for example, if your dog or cat or whatever is near the end of their lives,
Mhm.
and it's time for them to end their suffering,
Mhm.
it depending on what age your child is, you probably want to ask them in what ways
Mhm.
they want to participate. Do they
Yeah.
want to be present when
Mhm.
the end is brought to this animal?
Mhm.
How do we want to memorialize them? It's so important to do that. My ex-wife and I had we had a kitten for my son when he
Mhm.
was about 8 or so, I think,
Mhm.
and she got into some rat poison that was between
Oh.
floors
Oh.
and died.
Oh.
And I'll never forget the ritual that we had with our son Eric to
Mhm.
say goodbye to her. We all wrote cards, and we
Mhm.
buried her, and we got some of her. She had these little like catnip mouse toys,
Mhm.
and we all read our cards, and we were crying. And Eric wrote this wonderful little
Mm.
card where he said, "Willie, you were a wonderful friend. I wish you could have been my friend for longer." It was
Yeah.
so moving. But
Uh,
that's really empowering for
Absolutely.
kids because they see that, look, this is part of life. And
Yeah.
again, we're a society that when we do that kind of thing, the way I see it, we
Mhm.
are we are waging positive cultural resistance because there is so
Mhm.
little affirmation of so much about the natural world and our place in it. that
Absolutely.
to affirm
Mhm.
that death happens. It's going to happen to every single one of us. Let's make the
Right.
most of our lives, and
Mhm.
let's love and respect these animal companions
Mhm.
and memorialize them in ways that help us to bring them into our memories and into our hearts.
Yeah. 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 Um, I think we've had our dogs here at the office for years, and I have to say, I have to say initially, um, it helped to get a kid to come back in for a second session because I
I'm sure.
have a dog bowl out, and they'd be like, "Oh, you have a dog bowl?" It's like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to put it back. I forgot to put it away. I have a dog," and of course, I've already talked to the parent beforehand,
Mhm.
and so and there's so much to be able to teach kids and how companions can be so helpful in therapy, but what I've found over the years is we have many calls that will from adults who will say, "So I heard that you have a dog that I can hang out with during session." Yeah, from adults. And so
Sure.
yeah.
Who doesn't want to have a dog to pet? I mean, even being, there's research that shows that touching animals, being with them is healing in many
Right,
ways. It
right.
lowers cortisol levels, it
Yeah,
lowers blood pressure.
yeah.
It's come on. I mean, absolutely.
Mhm.
They're they're so they're so constructive to have in our lives. I
Yeah,
can totally see that.
yeah, yeah. Um, let's see, gosh, I really, really love this book. It has been
Thank you. I'm glad.
really, I recommend it to many of my clients, and I actually recommend it to a lot of therapists
Mhm.
so that they refer to this, to be able to help their clients as well. Yeah,
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad it's helping people. We know that it's helping a lot of people, and that's really rewarding to hear every time.
yeah, yeah. Um, do you have anything else that's coming up as far as another book at all?
So
Because
working on another book. It's long overdue. The Pet Loss
Mhm,
Companion has been out for some time. And so, yeah, working on another book that should be coming out soon. It'll be about the living with your pet toward the very end of their lives,
mhm,
and
mhm,
how we do that and how we take care
mhm,
of ourselves while we're taking care of them and everybody else who we're in a network of loving connection to.
mhm.
And also I'd like for people to know that I facilitate a Zoom pet loss support meeting.
I didn't know
And yeah, it's on the second, generally on the second Tuesday
that. Mhm,
of every month, and it's sponsored by Dakin Humane Society, which is located near me in Springfield, Massachusetts. And you can go to dakinhumane.org, and that's dakinhumane.org/programs.
okay.
And you'll see I think the last on the roster is pet loss support. And you can RSVP there. There's no cost. You can be anywhere in the world. We've had people all across the country and all across the world.
Oh,
It's the
wonderful.
next one is on Valentine's Day at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time,
Okay.
and then we have the Pet Loss Companion podcast, or
Mhm,
it's live on YouTube and Facebook, and you have been gracious enough to let me post it on your community, and I really appreciate that,
mhm,
Debbie. That's something that
mhm.
we do every week,
Yeah.
and it's an opportunity. Most of what we do is we read emails that we've received from audience members, and we talk
Mhm,
about them.
mhm.
And there's what we're learning is that this is so very helpful for so many people because people
Yeah,
feel so alone
yep.
in their grief. And as you know, this
Yeah,
kind of grief is more disenfranchised than grief in general.
absolutely.
And so it gives people the opportunity to feel like they are definitely not alone. We talk about
Yeah.
all the themes that are so in the book, but are in these letters every single time. There are
Mhm.
themes of guilt and
Yep.
the woulda, shoulda, couldas, even though the person who wrote it is the most super conscientious pet
Mhm.
caregiver you could ever
Mhm.
imagine, and
Yeah.
and feelings of just worry that they're not going to be able to feel better maybe ever.
Mhm.
Of
Mhm.
course we get stuck when we're grieving. We feel sometimes like this is the way we're going to feel for eternity. The time kind of stops.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
so it's just an opportunity for people to learn that this is just a part of life. We always move forward. And
Mhm.
we also talk about, there are some times when people are at the border between normal grief and what begins to look like clinical depression.
Mhm.
And so we'll talk about the importance
Mhm.
of seeing a therapist, if that may be helpful. There's never a downside to seeing a therapist. I'm a therapist. I've been in therapy
Mhm.
much of my life. I believe that most of us go into this work because we're trying to figure ourselves we're trying to
Right.
figure ourselves out. And so
Yes.
there is absolutely no shame and only
Mhm.
something to be gained by seeing a therapist under any circumstances.
Right.
And so, but those are the kind we talk about the whole gamut of
Mhm.
people's experiences because that's what they're bringing to this conversation, to the podcast.
Absolutely. And you know what? And actually, Michelle Ryan, who is on, who is a lovely therapist and was here at our center for a while. She made a comment of, I have a client whose dog was killed by the neighbor's Akita in front of the 5-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
And the husband does not feel that that was traumatic for her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does not feel it was traumatic for the daughter?
Right. That's what it, yeah. Yeah.
That's well,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of hard to know what to say to
Right.
that
Right.
because I mean, that sounds pretty horrifying. I would find it traumatic
Mhm.
if I were a witness. I would think that I'm not sure where they're going to go with this, but hopefully somebody is empathizing with this child
Mhm.
about this and allowing
Yeah.
them to express what they're feeling. I mean, sometimes I feel like parents will will they will deny the pain that a child is going through because it's so painful for them to imagine their
Yeah.
child going through that. But that's not, we don't have that kind of control.
Right.
We
Right.
just
You know
don't
what?
have that control. And if the
Abs
child is experiencing whatever the child's experiencing,
Mhm.
and that needs to be validated and supported,
Mhm.
and hopefully that's happening.
Yeah. You know
But
what?
there's so much denial, right? There's so much denial
Right.
about grief and loss and
Mhm.
pain.
Yeah. I think it speaks to that, um, protection of here, if we call it something else,
Yeah,
then it doesn't engender the helplessness that grief engenders. I think that
yeah.
that's where a lot of the woulda, coulda, shouldas come in, that our mind creates, is because if only da da da, then that doesn't make me feel so helpless.
Well,
Um,
exactly. So loss tips us off to how little control we actually have.
yeah,
That's the way I
yeah,
think about it. That loss is always teaching us that
yeah.
we're certainly trying to be responsible and we're trying
Mhm.
to manage everything that is within our control.
Yeah.
But it's not. We had a wonderful old dog. His name was Jack. He was kind of a fearful little fellow, and he was a very large Chihuahua, and he eventually developed congestive heart failure. And I used to say to
Mhm.
myself, I feel like I've spent so much energy loving and protecting this little soul.
Mhm.
And I hate the fact that I can't protect him from
Right.
the fate that awaits us all.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, ultimately, we every living thing be in our organism,
Mhm.
in our physiology, knows how to be born and knows how to die. And I
Yeah.
have to just trust that. I have to
Mhm.
just trust that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people realize that this is way outside of our control. And
Mhm.
one of the themes that we often will talk about is there is probably nobody to blame here.
Mhm.
But there's so much of an idea in the culture that
Mhm.
if somebody dies,
Mhm.
somebody must have done something wrong, right?
Right. Right.
And no, not a lot of times, no.
Yeah.
Everything dies. I'm gonna die, you're gonna die.
Mhm.
There's a great passage in a book called Voluntary Simplicity by
Mhm.
Dwayne Elgin.
Mhm.
And I always remember the title. And that title is Let Death Be Your Friend.
Ooh. Mhm. Yeah.
Because if we know that our time here is limited, we're
Mhm.
hopefully going to use it to best advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I know we're gonna wrap up in a few minutes. I I know that I always listen for three things. Is that I'm always listening for regrets that the person is carrying,
Hmm.
which usually come out as guilt,
Hmm.
which 99% of the time isn't about that they did something with malicious intent to harm.
Sure.
Um, and then I'm listening for resentments,
Hmm.
which usually come out as blame.
Hmm.
And then I'm also listening for the rejoices, the good stuff,
Hmm.
and the appreciations that especially that we have afterwards that we didn't realize,
Hmm.
and to be able to help clients be able to express that. Sometimes with letters, sometimes with kind of an empty chair. I remember one kid whose bird had died, and she wrote this beautiful, simplistic letter of which was a good thing, which was, dear Mr. Bird, I'm sorry for the times that I forgot to feed you. you know, um, I forgive you for the times that you would, peck at me and hurt me.
That's great.
Yeah. And thank you for being my best friend. Yeah. And I think that's really very, I think when we can get that simple, I think I usually refer to that as an internal repair that we,
Oh, that's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way I think about it, yeah, and this is also very simplistic, that grief is the cost of having loved.
Hmm.
And the process of grief is ultimately for the pain to to settle in as gratitude,
Yeah.
ultimately, after
Yeah.
all that you have to go through
Hmm.
in all of the kind of reckoning that you're
Hmm.
describing.
Yeah.
And another way that I think about it is that grief is the allowance of it's our allowance to let ourselves take this very painful news and
Hmm.
chew on it emotionally in a lot of different
Hmm.
ways that include expressing it and sharing it and maybe doing some physical activity or creating
Hmm.
artwork and
Hmm.
making that news older news that we
Hmm.
now carry in a way that for the most part doesn't pull our heart apart
Hmm.
every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's really important to note that we never come back to where we were after we
No.
lose
Right.
something, a relationship that was important
Hmm.
to us. We're forever changed by it.
Hmm.
We're given, if we are open to it, we gain wisdom, we gain a greater appreciation for the way the world works and our
Yeah.
place in it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately part of the beauty of living.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew. So thank you so much. I so appreciate your availability today to be able to talk about this. I know we could talk about it for a gazillion more hours. And so,
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with
mhm.
you, Debbie, and to speak with the folks who are part of this community, which I appreciate greatly. And hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Okay, I would love that. Thank
Yeah.
you, Ken.
Thank you. Take
Okay,
care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.